You are listening to the 5 a.m. podcast, and today is your day. Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast, where we explore ideas that challenge conventional thinking and inspire meaningful change. Today, I am honored to welcome a man known by some as the real Captain Kirk, a remarkable individual whose life's work embodies the intersection of education, civic responsibility, and practical solutions to societal change. Kirk Beck brings over 4 decades of experience as an educator, teaching mathematics and civics with a passion that extends far beyond the classroom. He's also a former Army captain, and he traded an engineering career at Shell Oil for the opportunity to shape young minds and foster critical thinking. His voice reached even further as an editorialist for a major Colorado newspaper, where he articulated perspectives that challenged readers to reconsider their understanding of constitutional principles. Now, since his active involvement in political activism during the Vietnam era, Kirk has been on a relentless quest to discover and share nonviolent alternatives to addressing conflicts, particularly those involving citizens and governmental authority. His latest book, Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue, draws inspiration from his interactions with Detroit's Threat Management Center and the teachings of Jack and Margie Flynn about about Americans' constitutional rights and the power of petition for redress of grievances. Now, before I roll that intro, a hearty welcome to you wherever you are listening or watching. Please consider sharing this with 3 of your friends. I know that many are going to enjoy this conversation. And of course, a big thank you to those that have left a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player for 5 a.m. podcast. And need to thank those who ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast and bought us a few cups of that delicious virtual cup of coffee this week and last. We do appreciate all levels of support. Now, let's roll that intro. Captain Kirk Beck, it's a privilege to welcome you to the 5 a.m. podcast. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Michael. This is a great opportunity to get the word out.
Yes, and it has to do with freedom and the Constitution, and sometimes people don't realize the lights are off and they're stumbling around in the dark, and what they don't realize is that there is a switch on the wall to turn the light on, and I kind of feel like we're going to shed some light on this conversation today. But I want to start first with a little bit of your backstory. You were working for Shell Oil as an engineer, and you moved over to being an educator, and then even being a constitutional advocate. It's really quite fascinating. Was there a watershed moment or realization that prompted you to direct your life in another direction?
I would say that it started back in Colorado 40-some years ago when I got a ticket at 2 o'clock in the morning on a rolling stop.
Oh, wow.
And I began to realize this doesn't make much sense. There's no victim here. And gosh, the people who are writing the ticket are getting the money.
Yeah.
So I was curious. I've always been curious. Found myself like 35, 40 years later, sitting in a jury pool right behind a gentleman who was up on 17 felony charges for a real estate scam. He interjected something and the judge cut him off right away and he said, "Sir, you chose to defend yourself. You don't have an attorney. You don't want an attorney. You're going to have to play by all the rules." And the whole time that he is putting the defendant in his place, the defendant is right in front of me shaking his head. No, that's not right. I had an idea what was going on. And 2 days later, I was on the jury pool and I was asked a question by the judge, and I eventually got 5 minutes to make my case. And he said, 15 minutes later, "Mr. Beck, you can leave." I left, but I came back the next day, sat right behind the defendant, went out for lunch with him, found out about Jack and Margie Flynn, and I began to really realize, wow, the power of paper really has tremendous opportunities for Americans to seize those 3 words, we the people. It is not they the elected. It has always been we the people. and the power of paper and specified in the Bill of Rights, in the First Amendment, petition for redress, petition for remedy of grievances is there.
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. That's so
That's where it
interesting.
started, in the courtroom.
Okay. Well, so let's talk about this power of the paper approach to, I guess it's addressing governmental overreach. And could you explain how affidavits function as remedies in this context and why this, it sounds like it's a nonviolent approach. And it seems like it could be very effective.
Very, very effective. I can go through 5 victories already, but I want to
Sure.
say this. At the end of this presentation, we're going to give them a link where they can
Okay.
go and get a free gift.
Okay.
They'll also learn about the Power Paper course that's available at a 50% discount through this presentation.
Okay.
So now, getting on.
Yes.
Affidavits. Americans need to understand that an affidavit is simply a statement of truth put before a government official. She could be sitting down at the bank. She's a notary.
Okay.
And you're specifying everything in your affidavit is true. In our affidavits, we say they are constitutionally valid.
Okay.
They are based upon evidence, fact, and truth. And if they're crafted in this manner, they cannot be rebutted. But we specified to the government official, or in the case of Best Buy, it was a corporate official,
Okay.
they have a responsibility to answer. So our first paragraph lays out the responsibility. The fact that not answering when they can answer is kind of like fraud.
Okay.
So the final paragraph specifies to them you have 30 days in order to rebut the elements of the affidavit. Otherwise, everything in it can be used against you, Jim Schwartz, Mary Johnson, in any court in America. And that includes, in California, the small claims court, because in California, you can sue for discrimination. And that's pretty discriminatory if you're running over my rights. Not privileges, not immunities, but my rights. So that's what we specify in our affidavits, and then they have to answer.
Wow. That is that is really powerful. And this, as you're talking, and as I was looking over this and reading about you before we got together here on the platform, thanks to Podmatch, by the way, for connecting us. But this made me think of Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals. And then in my researches, I learned that you were um, involved with the Vietnam War era protests. That even led me more to want to ask you, does this have anything to do with Rules for Radicals, and or maybe that approach of selecting the individual?
I've read most of that book, and the thing that I remember most about it is if you're going to be up to something diabolically evil, make sure you accuse the other people of doing it first.
Gold prices have historically risen during economic uncertainty. The time is now. Visit mindstandgold.com. The reason I was thinking about that terrible book is it was very formative and very powerful, and we see those techniques used all the time. And I was just wondering if you took away from maybe that book of how these affidavits go directly to the official. And there, as you and I talked about earlier, the oath of office. Can you talk about that?
Well, the thing that I love about the affidavit process is that it's based upon the Constitution of the United States. So I love talking to people on the left.
Okay.
Because I want them to study the Constitution.
Yeah.
I want them to know about the Supremacy Clause. California can pass any law, any statute it wants to. It's not law unless it's constitutional.
Wow.
Well, we can bring out this Constitution and say, well, sanctuary status, you can't really do that. The federal government has control over immigration. Now, out here in California, our attorney general got a letter from the Trump administration telling him, hey, you could be open to civil and criminal actions
Hmm.
by your activities out there in California. Our affidavit to the same attorney general points out one additional thing. The federal government can only go after you in your official capacity. We, the people, can go after you in your personal capacity.
Ah,
And
okay.
if you're found violating your oath of office, personal capacity, you took your oath and you violated it? My goodness, that means you can't hold office anymore. And if you're a lawyer, you can't practice law anymore.
Oh, really? Well, that's pretty
Serious
serious.
this is. So
Wow.
we've got 6 affidavits on the attorney general's desk. I need more. I've
Okay.
got people across America sending letters of notification, not affidavits, but letters of notification saying, hey, we see what you're doing out there in California. You better knock it off because you're violating your oath. Keep saying that over and over and over to them. You're violating your sacred oath to the people. Why,
Wow.
in God's name, are you doing that? And then, of course, you have to specify exactly what they're doing wrong. And in many cases, we can go to the Code of Federal Regulations, we can go to Supreme Court decisions and just make the case.
Wow.
And we put that all in an affidavit. We send it certified mail.
Okay.
We send it with return request receipt. So we have evidence that the government official has been served. And then ultimately, we can take them to court.
Wow.
I was out in Wisconsin recently. I found out that people in Wisconsin can't do what we can do in California. We can take them to small claims court. They can't.
Huh.
But that's
Wow.
state by state. If you can't do it in small claims, you can always take them to superior court. But as I tell people, I personally have 5 victories. I know how to use the power of paper to protect my rights. I can't
Okay.
protect everybody else's rights unless
Yeah.
we get some kind of a critical mass of people who can go
Right.
into the courtroom and make sure that that judge understands we're not here under your jurisdiction, we're under
Mhm.
ours. Michael,
Fascinating.
if I might, I want to quote something from the Declaration of Independence. Yes.
Yes, please do.
Thomas Jefferson wrote these words. He, speaking of the king, has combined with others, speaking of Parliament and the colonial
Hmm.
governors, he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. That word Constitution is a small c. It's not talking about the United States Constitution, which came
Right.
11 years later. He was talking about English common law.
Wow.
So let's finish his statement.
Sure.
He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of, here it comes, pretended legislation.
Wow.
I maintain a very high percentage of government actions, statutes, are color of law. They're pretended legislation. But the Declaration says, after those words that every American probably knows, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it goes on to
Hmm.
say, it goes on to say, the governments exist to defend our rights based upon the consent of the people. Well, what if we don't consent?
Yeah.
If we hit them with an affidavit showing our disconsent, then everything begins to change. We don't want to go into their courtrooms. Over 10 years ago, I had a judge do me a big favor. I was defending myself in a misdemeanor case, and I brought up a point of objection. He said, you need to explain that. I began to explain it, and he said, stop. Mr. Beck, you bring up some very valid points. Nevertheless, that's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up by way of pretrial motion. He did
Hmm.
not have to tell me that. He did.
Wow.
And now I understand. When you go into the courtroom and you start arguing the Constitution, you might find a judge that'll let you go on for a while.
Okay.
You might find a judge who says, you open one more word about the Constitution, I'll hold you in contempt of court. And that blows most Americans away. But that's
Because
you're in their jurisdiction.
yes. So you're outside of the jurisdiction of the Constitution when you're in the courtroom. Is that correct?
You're outside the common law. And that common law is where we got to get back. I
So, so then how would you define the judge's jurisdiction then?
It's statutory jurisdiction. They
And that, sorry, go ahead.
they pass all kinds of statutes. Statutes are not laws. According to the Supreme Court of the United States, they're not laws. And they must be stopped by the American people. We have a responsibility not to follow unconstitutional laws, but we do it all the time. We consent to their jurisdiction. That's why we're going to keep losing.
So the American people are actually consenting to be under the rule of another set of laws and statutory decrees. Would that be correct?
The 14th Amendment says that United States citizens have privileges and immunities.
Okay.
I am a California citizen. I don't really want to be a United States citizen. If I only got privileges and immunities, I'm not going to give up my rights for that. So you need to know who you are. It's kind of a scam game going on. You need to
Okay.
understand and do a bit of reading. There's not a lot of books you need to read. It's not rocket science or brain surgery. But you
Okay.
need to understand that we've lost our proper jurisdiction. And there are many, many judges who don't know this. I had a judge running, she's a district attorney and she's running for being a judge. And I asked her, according to the Seventh Amendment, what is the Seventh Amendment? And she was very embarrassed. She said, I don't know. Well, ma'am, that's the amendment that gives me a right to have a jury trial in your courtroom. Now, she's very embarrassed. But it even goes on to say something more, that all facts must be adjudicated according to the rules of common law. What are the rules of common law? Now, Michael, I'll come back on your program on another day
Sure.
and we'll talk about what are the rules of common law. But here is the one that you need to know.
Okay.
The basic rule of common law is no victim, no crime. If
And
I'm in a
so
courtroom when there's no victim filling out a verifiable complaint against me,
right.
I'm in their jurisdiction.
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. I've heard this before, no victim, no crime. It's something that sounds wonderful. It doesn't seem that it has a practical reality in the world we live in. Uh, this almost seems like it would have a connection to banking and debt then, this idea of no victim, no crime.
It started off with I took Margie and Jack's affidavit when I got stopped for a rolling stop.
Okay.
And I did my homework, put the affidavit together. I specified to the patrolman the two things that he did wrong, that he violated due process when he stopped me. Then I put it in an affidavit. I sent it certified mail. I'm sure when he got that, he didn't throw it in the trash. He ran that upstairs. Somebody in the legal department said, let him go. I don't know what he said, because one of the things I've learned is that when you do win in court, they'll never tell you why.
Right.
So when I went to court, the The patrolman showed up. He gave something to the judge, and 2 minutes later, the judge was asking for Mr. Beck. Where are you? Mr. Beck, you can leave. Your case has been dropped. Now I knew I had something that was a lot more powerful than I originally thought. Because
Yes.
I'd been in court 5 times, all for the same thing, rolling stops.
Huh.
5 of them out here in California, rolling stops. Well, now that was a $240 fine that
Wow.
disappeared. I don't have to pay that. Wow, I began to think, well, now how else can I use this? And one of the first things I did is one of the aspects of due process is notification. That's what our affidavit is. Our affidavit is notification to the offending party, pointing out to he or she what they've done wrong. It's
Wow.
common sense, it's common law, and it's just common decency. Help
Hmm.
if somebody's making a mistake, tell them about it.
Right.
Don't threaten them. Just tell them that what they're doing is wrong.
That's fascinating.
So when I went to both my state attorney, my state senator. I went to my assemblywoman, and I asked them, according to the Declaration of Independence, what is the purpose of government? And
Hmm.
they both flunked. They didn't know. And then I read those words that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men.
Yes.
So, hey, I told her that's your job. Don't trample on my rights, secure them. 6 months later, she was sponsoring a bill that would put every pastor and priest in Riverside, in the state of California,
All right.
as a possible felon for simply sitting in a room and explaining to somebody from the Bible about sexual dysphoria. Just
Okay.
counseling. Well, this is a clear infringement on a person's right to free speech as well as religion. So we sent the affidavit out to her along with other people.
Hmm.
The bill that had passed the Assembly, a bill that had passed the Senate, was eventually pulled. They
Wow.
didn't pass it. 6 months later, there was a resolution basically asking pastors not to do this.
Hmm.
My assemblywoman didn't even sponsor it. She went from sponsoring a statute to not even sponsoring a resolution. She got the message. We're
Wow.
watching you. We're watching you.
Wow.
During COVID, we had 2 situations. In California, we have 58 counties. Over 40 of those counties have sheriffs who think that our governor and our state legislature is out to lunch.
Hmm.
And they don't follow statutes necessarily if they're, in their
Right.
understanding, not constitutional. So our sheriff said, we're not enforcing masks. We're not enforcing restaurants to shut down.
Hmm.
But we had a chief medical officer that was going around doing that. So we got a hold of what is called the Fauci dossier, and we placed that on his desk and pointed out, you can't do that unless you follow the Code of Federal Regulations for mandates
Hmm.
like this.
Yes.
He did nothing, so then we just followed Jack and Margie's game plan. We put the affidavit into a letter along with another affidavit to the person's superior, in this case, the county supervisor.
Wow.
Within a couple of days after I sent the letter, I got a phone call from a very angry supervisor
Those are the best kind.
who was telling me that he didn't appreciate what I was doing. I said, well, I don't appreciate what you're not doing. Now, I'm telling you, this is what the problem is. I've given you the affidavit
Hmm.
to the medical officer. I've given you the Code of Federal Regulations that he's violating. You better do something about it, otherwise you're culpable. Well, 2 months later, that guy's gone. The supervisor, they got rid of him.
Wow.
So uh, they never told us why, but we just know that what we're doing is right. And sometimes we get exactly what we want.
Yeah.
Best Buy told me I had to wear a mask inside their store. I said, well, it's not a law. I said, yes, it is. No, it isn't. It's a mandate from the governor who doesn't make laws. he can give you good suggestions, but you don't have to follow them, and I'm not. I'm not wearing a mask in your store. So they wouldn't let me in their store, so I filed an affidavit with them. In that case, I couldn't put it in the mail. I had to drive over to Glendale and serve it in the proper means. But it was served, and 3 months later, I went to court. Now, I always say, when you go to court, make sure you take a witness with you, because you cannot trust the clerk. I've learned that. You can't trust them. So I went, and I thought that I was going to have my pretrial motion, and it kept being delayed. They weren't going to answer me. And then finally, the day of the court hearing, it came out and said, it's denied. You can't deny my right. But nevertheless, the clock has run out. I have to go to court, and I have to present to a judge who hasn't seen any of the affidavits. And of course, she was blindsided. That's the whole purpose of my process, is trying to not put judges in a bad situation. So, but the main thing is, people say, did you win? Well, my purpose was not to gain any money. I just simply wanted them to back off in their policy.
Right.
So A, they had to show up. Best Buy had to send somebody to the court. So I consider that a win, because if they have to show up for me, then they have to show up for you and you and you and you. And that'd be a win in itself.
Yes.
Well, the judge ruled against us, so somebody would say he didn't win. But then I filed an action against the judge. Now the judge can't sit on any more of my cases. So there's things that you learn by going to court. I've never been shy about going to court. It's because I always felt, look, I'm not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
Some people spend a lot of money to go to law school. I'm just going to go to court.
Yeah.
I'll learn a lot by doing the law. And I never walk away without learning something. Sometimes I
Right.
hit a gold mine, like I
Yeah.
did with Jack and Margie Flynn.
Gold prices have historically risen during economic uncertainty. The time is now. Visit mindstandgold.com. Ladies and gentlemen, as you're listening and watching, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. As you're listening about his experiences, do you have some of the same experiences, or do you have questions? Well, if you have questions, Kirk, let us know your website and how they can get in touch with you.
Very good. The main website that you can get in touch with me is through remedy@law.us. Remedy, law.us. And you can get in touch with me through that.
That's great. Now, I also want to ask you about your book, Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue.
Yes, there it is.
Tell us about this motive for writing this book.
I had my youngest son who had a tendency to want to be one of those macho guys.
Okay.
He liked fighting. And I've never enjoyed fighting. I had one fight when I was in 6th grade. I got beat up pretty good. They say I won the fight, but I didn't feel very good about it.
Right.
I just don't think violence is the first recourse, for sure. So being as I am, and then the Vietnam fiasco, the people I lost in Vietnam, just riveted in me a desire to fight against violence. So I would make up stories at night about a cop, a black cop, who knew more martial arts and who loved people. And his whole purpose was to disarm violent situations before you have to end, violent people. So my wife would say, you need to write a book. I said, well, the whole thing, I'm very practical. I'm not going to do things that are impractical. I don't know if there's cops like that. Maybe it just doesn't seem realistic, but by God's grace, I met Dale Brown in Detroit, and I went to his website and I saw 7 cops, all with 15 plus years experience, all saying the same thing. Why weren't we not taught this way? Had we been taught this way, there would have been less shootings, less death, and there would have been far less lawsuits against the city of Detroit.
Wow.
I was so impressed with that I had to get on an airplane and I flew to Detroit and I spent one day with Dale Brown. His security, he teaches police officers, law enforcement people, how to disarm violent situations so you don't have to use lethal force.
Wow.
And one of the things that he said is when you're really skilled at martial arts, a lot of the fear is lost. If somebody's coming at you with a gun or a knife, he said, my wife has 10 different ways she can disarm this guy. My wife.
Yeah.
So, and I had an opportunity to meet her as well. I wouldn't want to mess with her. The point is that when police officers are properly trained, and his security officers go through 1 hour of martial arts training every day before they go out.
Wow.
Every day. And they're in good shape. They're not fat. But they also realize, hey, why chase a guy through town, endangering all kinds of people with your
Vehicles?
motorized
Yes.
vehicles? Why don't you just get his driver's license, or his driver's license plates, and do a more appropriate arrest without putting other people at risk?
Yeah.
There's just lots
$1 million
of things that
question.
Dale Brown pointed out to me that I've verified through other police officers. Yeah, you don't need to do it that way.
Right. There was a young child, maybe 6 or 8 years old, that was killed by a police, they call them interceptors, their cars, as they ran a red light in this high speed pursuit. And of course, many people were then asking, is that really the best way? I mean, you know who the person is. You know well, you may not know the driver's identity, but you certainly have the tags right in front of you. And can find out usually where that car is at night. Now, is there maybe something that you wish more officers understood about the citizens that they serve?
Well, yes, they need to understand the Constitution of the United States of America. Um, I had a situation where I was talking to a guy who was an evangelist to Muslims.
Okay.
And he said something that, what? He said, yeah, he said, because I look like a Muslim, because I'm from the Middle East, I get preferential treatment at the airports. Wait a minute. Wait, what do you mean? Explain that. I said, well, because what the Muslims have done is that they tell their people that if you think you're being profiled by a police officer, get their badge number and their name, and then turn it into our organization, and we'll make sure they never do that again.
Wow.
So they're well schooled in how to deal with police agencies that just go around profiling people. So there's a lot to be learned. Americans need to understand the Constitution of the United States. And by the way, I never argue with police officers on the street. I argue with them with paper later.
That makes a lot of sense.
And my paper, you see, if I'm arguing with one cop on the street, I'm arguing with one person. When I use paper, probably a whole bunch of police officers read it. And I
Yes.
know the legal eagle upstairs is going to read it.
Yes.
And people are going to begin to recognize, God, yeah, a lot of these traffic stops really are not constitutional. The more we teach police officers the Constitution of the United States in a tactful, respectful manner, the better they're going to perform. They're going to be better cops.
Yeah. And we'll have a better, safer society.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to ask you, as we're wrapping up here, you have another website, correct? Affidavitsecrets.com.
Yes. At affidavitsecrets.com, you will get access to the free gift.
Okay.
That is, you just give us your email address, and you will also start to get what we call executive summaries of each of the chapters, the 57 chapters in the book.
Okay.
So you'll see what chapter one's about. and you can go through the book that way. And you can also get the course, The Power of Paper, at 50% off. If you go
Wow.
to Remedy at Law, it's a certain price. Through this offer, it's at
Okay.
50% off.
Well, it almost sounds like we have a textbook companion to go along with the course.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. Yes. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What a conversation. Obviously, I need to have Kirk back on, um, just to talk about so much more of how this relates to us and talk about participatory republic that Americans have. And the man with the hair and and the tan, he's not the savior. And it really comes down to personal responsibility, doesn't it, Kirk?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because so often we harp on our rights and don't talk about our responsibilities.
Yes.
This is every American's responsibility to know the law and to defend it.
Yeah.
That's why it's a republic, not a democracy.
Yes. Yeah. One nation under God. And we there's so much potential uh from the ground up to have the nation that we want to live in. And so I want to remind our viewers there's a couple of websites that you can go to. I'll repeat: the affidavitsecrets.com. Head over there. Kirk, I got to thank you for being here today. This has been an enjoyable and an informative conversation.
Thank you, Michael, for having me back. I want to say one last thing. It's
Yes, please.
affidavitsecrets.com, and let's put a / Michael,
Okay.
so that
Love
when
it.
it comes across, we know where that person came from. Affidavit is singular, secrets is plural.com / Michael.
Great. Well, thank you for that. We appreciate that. And thank you to our viewers. Please make sure to head over to Kirk's two websites and learn more about your rights as an American citizen. And we want to appreciate that you have joined us for this conversation. And please, as I mentioned before, share this with 3 of your friends. I know there's many that are going to enjoy this conversation and learn something from it, and maybe even as they educate themselves, save some money on those fines and other things like that. So thank you for sharing this, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here and watching. Thank you for all of your support, whether it's a 5-star review or over at buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Remember to seize your day and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those adventures in between. I'm Michael Klassen. Turn everyday teaching moments into a valuable lesson about long-term wealth preservation. Gold prices have historically risen during economic uncertainty. The time is now. Visit mindstandgold.com today and secure your family's future with your first gold purchase. Your children's financial future is too important to delay. Start their golden future at mindstandgold.com.